at Cogent as well. So thank you, Ajay, for being the moderator today. And today's topic is cyber trends and horizons, emerging threats and innovative defenses. The speaker, I'm very thrilled to introduce him. He's Arun de Souza, an honor in the CISO Hall of Fame. He's a global security leader with more than 20 years of experience and recognized for award-winning programs in identity management and IoT security. He will have a chance to introduce himself in a bit, but this was just a short intro. Thank you for being here, for wanting to participate in this Tech Social. For the audience, if you have any comment, any questions, you can raise your hand. We can take your questions, or you can also leave them on the chat section. So thanks again for being here. Ajay, over to you if you have any introduction as well.
Thank you, Gabby. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I think you'll get something good out of this. Arun's been around for a long time, which is a good thing. He's, seen small organizations, large organizations. He's actually has a podcast, and then he's also a father of two children too. So just wanted to throw that in there. He's traveled all over the world, and we're excited because he could give us some insight into the ever-changing landscape of cybersecurity, right? So, especially in these days, I think it's it's warranted just because of the landscape that's out there, the different threats from different countries, and then even internally our own threats that we have, and the ransomware. So I'm just going to kind of turn this over to Arun and let him get started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Gabby, and thanks for having me. You guys have spoken very eloquently about my background, so I'll only add a little tidbit about some passions I have outside of cybersecurity. One is playing duplicate bridge, the card game, and then I like to read and watch movies. And I used to run, but I only can walk now, so not in the winter here, as Ajay noted, it's pretty cold, and I like making new friends, and so I'm glad to be here. And like Ajay and Gabby said, have any questions for me, just or for Ajay for that matter, just raise your hand or put it in the chat. So, I guess over to you, Ajay, for the first question, I guess.
Sure. So, one of the things I think would be interesting is, can you share with us some of the emerging threats and, some of the stuff on your mind? What do you see kind of coming up, and some of the stuff that, that we probably should be aware of, and then you feel is relevant in today's.
Absolutely. First and foremost, as we are in this era of uh, everything connected everywhere, like we have these smart watches, smart TVs, smart health devices, and everything, right? Everywhere, even the TVs. So I'm talking about the Internet of Things, and there's a statistic I read. I think there will be 75 billion IoT devices by 2025. Can you imagine? That's a huge thing. So having read that stat, I'll lead into say the exponential rise of IoT devices really has me concerned, especially as it results in increased risk due to the vulnerabilities in IoT devices. Because we all know that many IoT devices, they don't have good security. They use cheap operating systems. They don't have secure transmission in the cloud and whatnot, right? So therefore, especially if you use these enterprises, increases the attack surface for enterprises. We'll talk about IoT and in the OT arena in a minute. The other thing to consider also the security and privacy risk nexus of the IoT because of all the global regulatory compliance regulations, right? Because, for example, if you violate GDPR, then you could have a fine of up to 4% of the company's revenue, and double jeopardy applies. So the IoT is the first thing. Now, in the manufacturing arena, and of course, we're in Detroit, right? There's a lot of manufacturing companies. I think ransomware continues to be a key risk, especially because if something happens due to ransomware to take down the manufacturing line, cause significant downtime, there could be a customer impact, customer fines, and whatnot, right? And in many manufacturing companies, IT and OT don't always work well together. So that increases the risk surface because they introduce things, without sometimes the proper governance. Especially, machine suppliers come in and they connect stuff through unsecured wireless networks or 5G networks, which is convenient for them, but that can be a hopping point, right? One of the stories I remember, it's a true story, a famous hack that happened, Ajay, maybe you heard of it a few years ago. A big casino in Las Vegas was hacked. Do you know how? By actually a fish tank, believe it or not, that was connected to the internet without security. So they connected to the fish tank, jumped to the corporate network. And can you imagine what happened after that? Something not very good.
Yeah, I understand that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
continuing on. Yes, thank you. And then third-party risk and exploits are increasing, right?
yeah,
Supply chain security is vital. Everyone has heard of solar winds, for example, right? Because a chain is as strong as vital link, as its weakest link, right? So I think one thing that we haven't seen yet, but it's coming down the pipeline, is AI-powered supply chain attacks, right? That will use multimodal input points to attack the enterprise, whether it's to the email security to encourage fraud or things of that nature. Now, we live in the cloud economy, and a lot of these cloud transactions happens through APIs, right? And that's very convenient, but we know that always developers they rush things to market. There's not the proper governance and so on. So I think due care and diligence is especially needed as more and more companies go this route. You need API security tools. It's very essential. And last few things that come to my mind is uh, I've read a lot of breaches happen either due to people, so security training and awareness is very important, the greatest ROI there, but as well a lack of data hygiene and governance leads to a lot of exploits and breaches. So data characterization and governance platform and due process is very important. And I would say, as I think about it, rounding out the list, to me, are nation state attacks. There's turmoil all over the world. They're weaponizing security. Some years ago, I think Kaspersky was used by certain government to attack or steal secrets from the, US government or and even some threat actors in another country did it, right? Social engineering, to the point of people being the first line of defense is rampant. You don't not only have phishing through email, you also have wishing where you get these spam calls and they try to trick you into giving details of the corporate secrets and so on. And we live in the uh, era of the cloud. The cloud is the cornerstone for digital commerce, but same thing as before, where it's convenient, scalable, you can save costs. Many a time things are rushed very hurriedly. So I think cloud vulnerabilities and misconfigurations are something to be watched for. Hope that resonated, Ajay. Thoughts?
yeah, it did. So just an interesting note, I worked for Kaspersky for 5 months, and when I found out that was happening, is that what they did is Kaspersky had the commercial division and they had a government division. They pulled them off of all of the government, the DoD, Department of Defense, and installations at that point. And then I gave my notice and actually left right after that happened. So it didn't surprise me when that was happening. I was like, okay, it's time for me to go. I was as a cybersecurity advisor for them on the DoD
Yeah.
side. The second thing is it's interesting. One thing you brought up was, as we proliferate and we get into this, I call it, a virtual economy where we're using PayPal, we're using Apple Pay. Just curious, do you think that's going to be exploited as well? And that's one of the areas that we really, really need to, shore up on cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. And I was sort of hinting towards that earlier, because at the end of the day, IoT devices, and a phone is also an IoT device, isn't it? So we hear of all these different malwares coming into whether it's the Apple Store or the Google Store, and people try to steal it. And yes, Google Pay is convenient, and Apple Pay and all that is convenient. But remember that most of the time people are using it with the phone, and the phones are the most easily hacked device of all. And many a time, people don't have even antivirus software, a good one on the phone. They don't use a VPN. So I think there can be data breaches through that. So I highly recommend if you have a phone, think about a solid antivirus software, not the one we just mentioned, Ajay, of course. A VPN is highly recommended, and even a VPN at home. I think because these days you can't be too careful, right?
So that's one of the safeguards that you recommend, is to use a antivirus software and then a VPN type of service. Any good ones that you would recommend? Do you think that you've seen?
Well, obviously, there's so many of them, and it doesn't mean that
Right.
I'm correct. But I've tried a few, and I actually use ESET, which is a Czechoslovakian company, as antivirus on my PCs and my phone. And I
Okay.
also use NordVPN for the VPN as well. And there's others, right? I mean, some of the things like McAfee, they have included VPN. It's what you like. I mean, just got to be careful because, just keep uh, the rating. But certainly at level of a principle, I think AV and VPN, those are essential things.
Okay.
Arun, I have a question going back to IoTs. How can we know if an IoT device that we have at home or that we use, personal use, is like you said, like cheap, made with cheap software, or I don't know if that's something, but should we like think about brands? For example, is it better to have an Apple Watch or a Samsung watch than a Chinese one, or like any other that doesn't have that, status?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, Gabby, there's no absolute, but I will say this. Apple has shown a strong commitment to security for sure. I mean, they've been lately some chinks in the armor. So certainly I would say Apple watches are good. Now, again, some years ago, it was seen that the Samsung TV has been eavesdropping on people. You must have read about that, where the Amazon Echo has recorded conversations and emailed them to people. So when those things happen, you worry, but people are trying. I would say in this way, it's hard to know because, the today's hero company will be tomorrow's goat. All it takes is one mistake, but all you can do at a given point in time is to look at a track record. So based on the example I gave, as of the moment with what we know, if you're going to buy a smartwatch, yes, buy an Apple. Tomorrow we don't know. Buy an LG TV, for example, something or Sharp versus a Samsung, possibly just because of data point. I mean, they are perfectly fine products. Now, whether we can know it's cheap or not, we don't really know, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody touts the security of the devices, but we don't really know how effective they are because the fact of the matter, biggest threat vector, just like your PC, which in corporate you do patch management and updates it and so on. These devices are supposed to connect to the internet and update it periodically, right? So if you, for example, don't have a strong connection, from your TV to the internet, you may not receive the patch because what typically happens is people connect the TV to the internet through wireless, right? So what's happening now? Many time, the wireless isn't carried to the TV, and so the TV update doesn't happen, right? So if you really want to be secure in devices that you're using, you need to make sure you have a secure connection to the internet. So in the example of the TV, maybe it's possible to run a network cable because every little bit helps, right? Because if the device is not able to update well because of a strong lack of a connection, so it's a lot of things. I think you have to take due care and due diligence, but it's all a point in time snapshot. I don't think you can say that one brand is better than the other over the long term. You can just take the data points at the present moment, but just be careful. And I think it's good to ask questions, because many times if you have friends in the cyber industry, sometimes they know or they've read of incidents, so they're aware of stuff just by talking to each other. So you're going to buy a new TV or a new fridge or whatever, right? Definitely talk to friends. Now, one thing I will say is, there's got to be a level of reasonableness involved, right? I mean, we've heard about the Ring doorbell, right? Spying on people, the Amazon Echo is an example. So what I'm trying to say is, why do you need an internet connected fridge? What for? Why do you need an internet connection? So I would say just like we do data minimization, we should do IoT device minimization. Only connect a device to the internet if it's absolutely necessary, right? Like, for example, there's an older person at home, there's a sort of health device that they're monitoring their blood pressure or whatever it is they're doing. okay, that has to be connected, but don't just connect things indiscriminately. Does that help, Gabby?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
So along those lines, one other thing popped up is this is just a thing I've noticed. A lot of people will buy their devices, and so like a router or like phones, and they never change the password. So the login will be admin, and it'll be welcome 123, and no one changes it. I don't know if you've
Right.
seen that, Arun, but I've seen it too many times. It's like,
No, yeah, I have, I have seen it. It's because, it's convenient, it's easy. You plug and play is a good thing, right? Plug in, but the thing is, one has to take the due diligence. And the same, I'd give the same advice to people, right? If you're going to connect it, if you don't work in IT, ask your friends or ask your relatives, they'll at least give you some advice. I mean, it's just simple things like even like, for example, many times you get these PCs, right, from the store and people just log in and keep working. But what is the danger of doing that? Ajay, you know that it comes with an inbuilt administrator password. And so therefore, if you
right,
log in with that account to a bad website, the shit's going to hit the fan, isn't it?
right,
Especially if you don't have a good antivirus and a firewall software. So I would
right.
say people, process, and technology, we talk about the enterprise, but it's equally important in the personal life as well to take the due care and try to reach out for help. And not everybody has that stuff, but we have to be careful. And I think training and awareness is important because I wish manufacturers would that are connecting devices to the internet say, okay, guys, this is how we start up your TV, but here's a security awareness video. These are things you shouldn't do, and you need to take care and watch it before you connect, things of that nature. That's easy for me to say, I know, but we got to do better. And as especially folks like you and me, we should always try to be advocates of good security to our friends, our family, and try to help them out, right? And then as time passes, they'll start to spread the word. Hey, you shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. It's a process and a journey, isn't it?
Yes. Oh yeah, it is. So along those lines, what else evolution have you seen or foresee that's coming up in cybersecurity? What are the, you know, um, things that are relevant? So for an example, AI, right? So one of the
Yeah.
things I always do with AI is it's a double-edged sword because the bad actors can also use AI, right? To, generate, and hack passwords, right? So what's your
Yeah.
thought?
So let's come back to that topic in once. I always try to
Okay.
talk in two sides of the coin, right? So I raise a flag about these different risks, and they could be more as well, right? That we just talked about. But one's got to think about, okay, at an enterprise level, what sort of cyber defense safeguards that you should implement to combat all these threats, either those are known or unknown, right? So I think I would say that, let me give it a thought here.
Okay.
I think
So
there's six.
along those lines, we talk about the digital landscape. You talked about it. We're very connected. All of our, we get into our car, boom, our Bluetooth is connected. We get into, our Apple phones or Androids. It's all connected. Even in the car, I had recently installed CarPlay, right, and all these things. So give me your insight and your feelings on some of that stuff, and what can we do anything to mitigate
Um,
those risks?
well, what I would say is I was thinking, six things came to my mind at the top, and we can have the interplay. I will answer AI question and emerging threats in a minute, of course, because that's a very
Sure.
important one. So at a higher level, right, and the solutions to some of these problems of IoT, etc., can come through, I think, six key safeguards that I counted in my head just now on my fingers. The first is identity as the cornerstone of digital security, right? That means leveraging identity is a core component for secure delivery of digital applications and services using multi-factor and so on, as well at the corporate level, leveraging identity management framework, right? Trying to incorporate suppliers and partners into it because, the biggest enemy of security is when you're distributing, like 20 or 25 different systems, passwords. So if you have a single sign-on with robust multi-factor and so on, I think that's very important, right? The second thing is, I think, zero trust to me and zero trust network architecture. It is really vital to dynamically balance the trifecta of identity, device posture, and session risk to provide the right access and prevent lateral impacts or attacks. And even the example you talked about earlier with your phone, the principle of having a VPN and so on, and it's sort of even extending zero trust to your personal life in the sense because you're not really making the device more robust, right? And then at the enterprise level, we talked about earlier, this is the era of the cloud. So I think, in my opinion, cloud security posture management, right? uh, the ability to deliver visibility to configuration effectiveness and fidelity, right? To make up that word, as well as appropriate compliance with security policy. The fourth thing I think is data protection, rest in transit, even the IoT devices on the corporate level, because if you don't do it properly, hacks can occur. I think in the question I think Gabby asked before, if people can intercept the communications, right? And at data at rest, the data characterization and governance platform is very important. And we all know that, especially in manufacturing, ransomware will happen. So I think you need to have a real robust cloud data backup solution that can help protect you from ransomware, right? If they take your data hostage, it's resistant to that. The fifth thing comes to mind is endpoint detection and response, because not only do you need effective anti-malware technologies that are heuristic and adaptive, but you also need endpoint detection and response, particularly in the enterprise, because you need to be able to automatically fix it. Of course, the danger there, as we've seen with CrowdStrike, which is the leading proponent, sometimes it doesn't work so well, which leads me to my last point that as a theme is integration and interoperability, because in the example of the CrowdStrike that happened, what was the problem? Not that CrowdStrike is bad or Microsoft is bad. It's the integration, interoperability between the two, and the timing and cadence of one patch versus the other was not well synchronized, right? So it's absolutely vital that all solution components in the security architecture work together, right? And last but not the least, I would say appropriate people and process are also done. Like, I mean, I've heard a story where a health practice invested in state of the art cybersecurity systems, whatnot. And you know how a hack happened is because somebody was going out to smoke, and so they wedged open the door, so they didn't want to use their badge, and they forgot to close the door, and they went home. So it's just common sense things like that, right? So yeah, yeah. Before we answer the question you asked before about AI and what's upcoming, any thoughts on what I said, Ajay?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, no, so because everybody's talking about AI today, right? It's like everywhere you go, right? So, we're even or as organizations ourselves, we're looking to use AI tools, right, to better assist in marketing, sales, whatever the application is. But I also see the flip side of that, with the bad actors, right? And so, you know, you hear these stories about China. They breed these guys. These guys are actually incredibly smart guys, and they don't even know they're doing this, but they're producing these algorithms and malware that's super powerful, more powerful than the traditional stuff.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Uh, So I think the question that you asked me earlier is, what are the different evolutions I see in cybersecurity? So let me give it a thought here. Okay, number one, without a fail, is artificial intelligence. I was going to address that anyway, so thank you for leading in. So when you talk about the future of cybersecurity, I think AI definitely leads a conversation, right? And as you noted, Ajay, the quest to harness artificial intelligence or AI will be a big shift. Now, the trick, in my opinion, is to balance the myriad risks that come with AI, as well as neutralizing AI bias via an appropriate level of supervision. There's an example of a AI system that you may have heard of where they were trying to save money in their hiring department. So they built this AI system. What happened? They found that certain classes of people were being filtered out because they picked up bias from, I guess, the programmers. So, the big risk of AI is if you don't neutralize the bias, right? You cannot have set it and forget it AI, in my opinion. You need there's a supervised AI. And unsupervised AI, is the pathway to singularity, right? Of course, I'm not trying to scare people. If you've not heard, singularity is where AI is going to run the world and people become irrelevant. Of course, I just say that just to make a point. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future, but I think supervised AI is important. But something that people don't think about, look at Chat GPT, right? The data model is 3 years old, 2 years old, and we're running important things on that. So as you do any sort of AI projects, data hygiene and continuous model calibration and update are really vital. Now, from a cybersecurity perspective, AI can be both friend and foe because generative AI, in my opinion, will evolve and enable threat actors to develop and launch complex attacks on enterprises such as malware or deep fakes, right? We have all heard of these deep fakes. But on the other hand, CISOs and security teams can use or harness AI to proactively identify, detect, and protect, a la NIST, to threats via anomaly detection, endpoint detection and response, and natural language processing, right? It's very important to establish AI policies and guardrails before widespread adoption, right? So, if possible, so using the public AI, there's a way to use, four walls AI and treat it like projects, like apps, release them, proper governance, right? So before I go to the next few things on my mind or emerging threats, does that help, Ajay, about AI? My thoughts on
Yes,
AI?
no,
Any
that
thoughts
covers
of
it.
your own?
Nope, that covers it. Well, it's interesting. So when I recently took a trip. I was in India this past July, and I experienced the IoT, craziness. I went to go check into my. I was in Delhi. I went to go check into my hotel, and they said, "Sorry, you can't check into your room." I said, "What do you mean?" And that was the day where the Microsoft system went down, and they say that it wasn't a breach, but I have my own opinions on that. And so I told the guy, I said, "Well, how do we check in?" He goes, "Well, we're going to write everything out." So he whips out a piece of paper and pencil and he starts writing all my information down. And he goes, "Oh, we can't even charge you. So we're not going to charge you for about a day or so until the system comes back up." And I said, "Well, how do I get into my room?" They go, "Oh, do you see that gentleman over there? Just tell me your room number. We got one master physical key, and you just walk up to your floor and open the door for you." I said, "Wait a second. The whole time I'm here, I have to do that?" They go, "Yeah, unfortunately, we're so
Wow.
connected here. Everything's on the system." And I was like, okay. So it made me realize, wow, you know, how that works.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to that, my daughter was traveling during the time of the CrowdStrike downtime and Delta being affected, and she was stuck in a city for 2 or 3 days because she couldn't get a flight. So we've seen that. It's a big risk. So we talked about AI. I think if I remember, I said there were five things on my mind about emerging things you should watch. The second is self-sovereign identity. I don't know, have you heard of that, Ajay? But I'll explain what it
No,
is. It's known
yeah.
as SSI, right? It's an emerging trend. Today what happens is you sign up for a service, right? And you give a username and password. You sign up for another service, a username and password. And many a time, uh, you mentioned about people not changing the password on their router. Well, after a while, people get lazy, and so then they don't change, use the same password for 10 different websites. And then they decide, okay, I'm going to be very efficient. So what do? They buy LastPass or some software and put all the eggs in one basket, and then LastPass gets hacked, right? So you see the danger of that, right? So what self-sovereign identity is, it enables everyone to take charge of their own identity, like a sovereign country in a secure digital trust world. And SSI actually leverages blockchain for identity assurance to enable everyone to control their identity and digital credentials. So essentially, at the end of the day, it postulates protection of privacy via a secure and trustworthy identity management framework. So, since you're enacting a digital passport to authenticate your own identity using your own credentials, so the no more you'll have to keep giving your username and password that will go away. So it makes it much harder for hackers, right? And minimizes the risk of identity theft. Now, it's not gone far enough. So the thought is, universal. Like even when you travel, using some combination of biometrics as a multi-factor, combination thereby with your face and fingerprints and your digital identity, you should be able to walk through, passport control safely without the grilling, right? So instead of having to pay for, some advanced service, you will be a vetted individual. I mean, the risk first is if data gets corrupted, then there's that. But so self-sovereign identity, I think that's huge. It's upcoming. It's not gone far enough, but I'm waiting for the day. Thoughts, Ajay, before I go to the next three?
Yeah, I think, well, no, I think those are awesome points. I think the issue is that I'm guilty of this. I always say, "Do you remember my password? Save my password," right? So you have all of these password safes, but to be frank with you, I have no idea who's managing that. And if that gets hacked, all my passwords are in there. You know what I mean? To your point, what are you going to do then at that point? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, no, it's yeah, absolutely. And it's an overwhelming to sign up for so many services, so exercise in infancy and it'll come one day and it'll help us all out. The third macro trend that I think is, the notion of data sovereignty, right? We've all heard about GDPR. I talked about earlier, the significant reputational risk and monetary loss involved, right? So, what is data sovereignty? It's the fact that if you're operating in any country, especially in Europe, you have to protect the PI of a citizen or resident within the country which the company operates, and also safeguard the individual's right to control and update and delete their own data. We all know that data is mission critical, right? The ability to gain proactive, actionable insights is very, very important. Uh, but balancing this business intelligence quest and data governance is mission critical because, you know the big problem with business intelligence, right? This derived data, Ajay, where the source system has very good control data, but then they take this, they take that, and they combine the data. What happens? Out goes the security, and you could have a risk, right, of
right.
a data breach. And then the last two I'll speak briefly. Fourth is network observability. I think network observability is the ability to enable efficient and dynamic visibility and visualization and actionable insights about the network state. It actually forges the nexus between, I would say, network operations and cybersecurity to strengthen resilience, reliability, and digital trust at multiple levels. I would say the business mission, user experience, and the enterprise ecosystem. And the very important thing about observability sounds passive. It's not. Underneath observability is the ability to take that data in real time and act, proactive workflows to fix problems. And that's been extended not just to network, but observability even in the enterprise ecosystem as well, right? And the last trend that is top of my mind and it's coming fast is quantum security, right? Quantum securities has applications cryptography, key distribution assurance, and data transmission assurance. So those are the sort of the five things on my mind. Any thoughts on those?
The quantum security is kind of interesting. I don't know much about it. Can you just kind of maybe what's the just a high level view? What is that quantum security, and why is that important?
So, we talked about AI being friend and foe, right? You did, I did. I would say quantum as a technology, quantum is the ability to take the processing power today to like the stratosphere because quantum computers are so powerful. I mean, transactions that are taking, days or hours to do now can be, resolved in instant like that. So the risk to the business is that you're taking all these controls and hackers will have access to these tools. So the thing is, whereas you're enabling the business with all these tools, the hackers and the bad actors also have access to all kinds of tools with much greater processing power. Think of, AI powered deep fakes and ransomware attacks powered by quantum, right? So that's a risk out there. On the other hand, quantum also allows you to do to today, if you talk of cryptography, you don't have the computers don't have the bandwidth to actually encrypt data to the highest fidelity and assurance. When quantum computing comes, you'll be able to have a higher level of cryptography, high level of control. So it's a two-sided sword. And I mean, it's not a perfect situation. It's not a perfect act. I think just like the AI conversation we were having earlier, as this evolving field is going to have to be, public-private partnerships to build guardrails, policies, best practices. It's an emerging area. And whereas I'm interested, I haven't read enough on it to talk more in depth like before. But what I will say, it's coming. The day is coming. I know Microsoft and Google and some other companies, even Apple, have started and made a lot of progress in quantum computing. So I think just like as AI, it's going to be a generational shift, but it's going to be sort of, the car engine, right? When it's kind of like how we went from gas to hybrid and so on. It's going to be like, it's the hybrid technology that has myriad risk. And to your point earlier, if you think connected car is, with the Bluetooth is a risk. My goodness, I mean, when quantum comes, and and people can attack networks through quantum, it's a big risk. Nothing to be scared about. Companies evolve, they will adapt, and I think it's something to look. And maybe another day we'll have another tech social in a few months, or next year we'll talk more about quantum a day, right? Does that help?
Right, right. And maybe driverless cars too. That's another topic I think we should address one day.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know where that's going, because that's another attack vector that I think is not protected very well. I think there's some things around that, but I just don't think it's there today.
Well, a couple of things, right? I'll address the point you made. It's an excellent point. One, I talked earlier about the security and privacy risk nexus with IoT, but people forget. I mean, so you're driving your car, right? So what happens is you plugged in your phone or Apple iPhone into the car, right? So now they know everything about you, where you're going, what you're shopping, the targeted advertising. You have no privacy even today, right? So how do you
Yeah.
protect against that? So and OnStar, if you have OnStar service, they know where you are at any given time. So that is a big risk, and people don't give it enough thought. Now, on to your point of the driverless cars, I heard a story 2 or 3 years ago that in 5 years we'll have the ultimate driverless cars, and I just laughed so hard. You know why I laughed hard? Ajay? Because it took 20 years to perfect anti-lock brakes ABS. You know that, right? So 20
Yeah,
years
right.
just for a brake, and they think they can have fully monitored driverless car, no, unmonitored, fully automated car. It's not possible. And even if it's technically possible, okay, think about a driverless car on the streets in Mumbai. Do you think it's actually feasible for the car to take that
I
many inputs?
I couldn't even imagine it. I don't think it's enough
No, my
AI
sister.
data there.
No, I
Boy.
mean, bullet cars will come and whatever, right? I mean, my sister's got a pretty smart car, but the driver he gets really frustrated because it has all these safeguards. It goes and suddenly stops. Suddenly, well, it stopped because it's right to do that, but the
Yeah,
thing is, it's just not clean lanes, clean highways. So I would say driverless cars are possible in well-controlled countries, or many of the less developed countries. The infrastructure and the road infrastructure is
yeah.
so poor. It's years, decades away, I think, in those areas for sure. But I do see a couple of things, right? So we talked about autonomous cars, but many years ago when I was a child, I used to read these books called by Tom Swift, about this young inventor, and they were written in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, I forget. But one of the books I remember, the title was the Tom Swift and the Triphibian Atomic Car. It's almost like James Bond, where the car can swim, fly, and operate on land. Now, the car that can swim, I've not heard of, but there are companies like, for example, Archer Aviation, which signed a big contract right now, is co-funded by Chrysler, Stellantis, to be able to have flying cars, not drones, flying cars. So think
Yeah,
about
I
that.
heard about that. Yeah. It's
So I mean, we're worried about driverless cars on the road, you know. So okay,
now we have
how
to
do
worry
you
about the airspace.
exactly right?
It's
As
like,
it is,
wait a
we have
second.
these. So first you had only birds. Now you have birds, you have drones, you have flying cars. Oh my goodness! How do you regulate all that,
All
right? I mean,
right. How do you navigate that? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if we'll
Um,
see it in our lifetime. So,
yeah. So
I
I
don't,
think you
I
asked
have,
me. Go ahead.
sorry, no. If you want to finish your
No, no,
point,
no. It's
that's fine.
okay. I go ahead, Gabby. What did you want to
Yeah,
ask?
I have a question. Going back to like identity, um, I have seen like on Instagram and things like that. I don't know if it's true, but I want to just say it. That in these countries like China, where they use this mass surveillance and advanced like facial recognition technology,
Mhm.
people are starting to like use these like white masks so the cameras don't take like their identity and so on. Do you see? I know that in some context it is happening already in the USA, but do you see that soon like making its entrance to the Western world? like having all these cameras around us and taking all our information and identity and all that?
Well, I would say it's already there. Do you know
Right.
where? In the UK. The
Okay.
UK has the same level of surveillance as China, and it's a small country. Now, I will say in the at least for what we know, China actually they take the data in real time. And so, for example, I don't know how true the story is. It might be an urban legend, but I heard of this where a person got into some fight or something after going to the bar, a young person, and then they've got the social credits. So one strike, two strikes, three strike. I don't know much about it, but what happened is that was his third strike, for example, and so his they affected his score. So when this young man got married and he wanted to buy a house, the bank wouldn't give him a loan because they violated his
Wow.
privacy because he has affected the social criteria. Now, in the UK, I don't think they're doing to that level. I think the reason the UK has got so many cameras almost at every street corner and more is because they're being proactive against emerging, terrorist attacks, and they want to be proactive, and that's why, right?
Okay.
So it's already there in the Western world. I think just like in AI, there is a balance, Gabby, between perceived convenience and perfect, perceived, taking care of the citizens. This is really making sure that just like with AI and the bias, that you're not violating the privacy for no good reason. And I would say to answer your question directly, I don't think it's going to happen that easily here because, after all, different democracies have different, pluses and minuses with democracy. So I think as long as a country is democratic, I think I do not, even if more surveillance comes under the guise of, public safety, I don't think the violation will happen to the level that's happening in China. I don't think it's
Okay.
going to happen now. Never say never, but I think it's a cultural thing, right? The principle of democracy is, there people do have rights, whereas, in the communist states, you do not have that. And that's
Right.
why. And to your point about people wearing the mask and whatnot, they can't do that because it's considered a violation. They can do it, but they'll probably receive a visit from somebody or someone's or a phone call. And it may even go to the point where actually wearing a mask like that, Gabby, in China might be actually wherein it could be a violation, like I said, in the score, the social index or identity, yes, not the credit worthiness, but your reliability index or whatever it is they call it. Make sense?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
I just want to ask one more thing, kind of switch a little bit here on gears. I always get these, hey, download this app and it's kind of related to TikTok. What's your feelings about that? Because on Apple, I always get this, hey, you want to be more productive, blah blah. Sometimes they look good, just any thoughts on that, Arun, to protect us?
S- s- So, Ajay, which did you mention an app in particular, or did you say?
Yeah, just I always get these things when I'm, like a commercial almost on my phone
Ah,
and download this app. And I don't
ah,
know if it's legit. It looks good, right? Because they're using behavior modification, right? Targeting, right?
mhm.
Just like when we
Right, right.
go and buy stuff. They're doing that now with apps.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So absolutely. So I think I thought I heard TikTok, so I wanted to be sure. So basically, the first thing I do when I get a new phone, now my phone is 2 or 3 years old, so it's not new. I go in and uninstall as many things I can uninstall.
okay.
When I get a new phone, and I disable things that I cannot uninstall that come like built into the phone, and I do not install things unless I absolutely need to do it. So I would say that I wouldn't, they say it's free, it's not free because why are they after you? They want to get your data and so on. So I generally, unless there's a real important reason for you to install an app for a phone, I say don't do it, right? Because nothing is free in this world. And to Gabby's question earlier, whereas we're not living in an undemocratic state, there's people collecting the data out there and whatnot, right? I mean,
Right.
Google collects a lot of data. So, I mean, you don't want to do that, right? So,
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And any comments on TikTok? I mean, I just want to get a political thing. I'd like to hear your take.
I mean, you know, I, I think, what is reality and what's the hype, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are certain two apps that have really created a firestorm of, public discussion. One is TikTok and the other is Telegram, right? The secure
Right.
messaging app. Because the CEO was arrested in France because, for example, Telegram doesn't take appropriate control. There might be terrorism, there could be hate, there could be pornography or whatever, right? So people are concerned about Telegram. Is Telegram itself a bad app? No, but it's back to the story of AI and the monitoring and the supervision if you don't do that, right? Now, TikTok, I would say it's become a fad, and I think, I would say based on the country of origin, one should be very circumspect about it because, for example, we all heard of Huawei routers and whatnot. They've been banned here, right, in the United States because they were spying, right, just like Kaspersky. So I would say now you got to look at, products that come from certain areas, be very, very careful before you use them because, if we think that the data is being used for private citizens in that country, then, what are they going to do with foreign data. So I would be circumspect. Is there really any reason to use TikTok? I mean, it's cool, it's convenient to make a snippets. What's the real benefit? I would say as a CISO, I always say the role of a CISO, and this, Ajay, is value protection versus value creation. Why do I say that? You got to protect your identity, you got to protect your data yourself, right? And where's the value really in adding apps like TikTok, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah. Thank you. I'm just
So
going to open it up. If anybody has any questions, is that what you wanted to say, Gabby?
yes, we do have
Good.
one from Edgar going back
Okay.
to password management. He's asking, should you separate or memorize your most critical password instead of using a password manager? I don't.
Yeah. I would say that I don't recommend a password manager, and I was very unpopular to see so because people wanted to get corporate subscription because all the eggs in one basket is a big risk. Many of the single one pass things have been hacked at one time or the other. So I would say don't do it. Don't do it. Memorize it or have some sort of write half the password somewhere and half the password and keep it safe, some sort of system like that, sort of the low tech way. Don't, if you can avoid using LastPass or some of the services, avoid it by all means because to me it's just not worth the risk. I mean, I cannot with a straight face tell you that I think the risk is low for the benefit. It's not, because if you stop and think about it, how often do you really sign into, it's not that often, right? And is it worth the risk to take those 10 or 15 passwords and put it so someone can hack your data? To me it's not worth it. Edgar, comprende?
All right.
Yep.
Sí,
Sounds like he's got
gracias, he said. Okay, so Ajay, do you have any last question?
No, I think this has been great. It looks like it's almost 12 o'clock. So, Arun, do you want to close it up with anything? Do you have any, anything else that you would, want to throw out there, please?
Yeah, I know when we went to lunch, we talked about a couple of things. So I came prepared to say a few words about that. One thing you said is, do I have any thoughts on the evolving digital landscape? And the last was you said, how do we shape the next generation of cybersecurity? So I'll take a quick minute or two for each of them. As far as the evolving digital landscape goes, right, as AI and digital privacy gain increased relevance, I expect that regulatory compliance will drive security as never before. Now, let's note that compliance and security are complementary functions, right? And enterprise compliance normally constitutes legal, internal control, internal and external audit. So it's very important for a CISO or director of cybersecurity to build a relationship heads of those functions because CISO can't be an expert in legal, in IA. He has to build those partnerships to be able to uh, fulfill regulations like GDPR or whatever they are. But also, regulatory compliance mandates, in my opinion, are evolving because balancing these effectively while rapidly innovating with AI is going to be a major challenge, especially because AI is an emerging technology. And I talked about some of the things about model calibration, update, and whatnot, but some of the risks of the cloud era also equally applicable to AI, and that's why for compliance, those shadow usage, resource utilization, and configuration management very applicable to AI in this era of compliance. And then, as far as shaping the next generation of cybersecurity, right, to all of us that are able to do it, I offer up four things. First, provide mentorship, just, make friends with young people, encourage them, help them, right? Engage, go to industry events, reach out to people, help young people, give them advice, right? And then third is mobilize, encourage attendance in communities, whether it's the Cyber Risk Alliance or the Cloud Security Alliance or whatever, because as you get senior, you can go out there and build mentorships, opportunities with folks. And also, last is encourage, supporting grassroots activities and scholarships to the extent you can, right? With partnering with companies, organizations. Those are my last words. Any thoughts on those few things I said, Ajay?
No, I think that's great. I think one of the things that Cogent does too is that we foster that exactly same stuff. We had an event last night. There's two or three people that came there, younger guys, and like I said, I liked it because they had the entrepreneur spiritship, and they're talking about AI and putting a product together. So within Cogent, we actually promote that very thing. And so, and we like that because I think that's where you get all the brightest of the brightest minds, and you just collaborate, so no, that's good. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully I have you back here and talk about some more stuff too. So
Happy to do
For
it.
sure.
So, thank you both, Gabby and Jay, for the invitation. I really enjoyed and appreciate the opportunity, and great to meet all of you. Is this a question? Is this been recorded? Or will be shared somewhere? Because yesterday
Yes.
okay, because some of the friends yesterday at the dinner that I organized every quarter were asking there'll be a recording. So,
Yes, we do have it live on YouTube, and afterwards it remains there, so I can share you the link, and you
okay,
will
if you
have
would,
it.
thanks.
Yep, for
Appreciate it so
sure.
much.
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you. I appreciate the time.
thank
Thank you,
you.
Gabby, too, and
Thank you so
everybody
much,
for
Arun.
participating.
It's been great.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week
Thanks.
for another
Bye.
session. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Yep. Thank you, Edgar, for your questions.